I was ordered on the
I can see why not, yeah.
thing here, I just make it pick up the sound.
Right, so selecting in your packets, we're going to start off with a public information meeting that is in the very front part of your binder. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Cindy Egan. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Steve Gilbert's running a little late, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is just an information session from Consolidated Communications regarding the possible future of broadband in the Rangeley area. And Charlie, are you out there? Charlie Woodward?
I am here.
Okay. Charlie, we're going to defer it over to you and the rep from Consolidated to kind of run this next session. I would just ask, we've got other plantation members, assessors that are zoomed in. And I would just ask at certain points, you just stop and ask for any questions from anyone here present and in Zoom land.
Will do. Will do.
Right.
Okay. How about a show of hands for who the plantation representatives are? Hello, Linda. Anyone else? Come on. All right. Well, hopefully, Linda, you'll be able to share this with the other plantation reps. So my name's Charlie Woodworth. I work at Greater Franklin Development Council. We're the region's, the county's economic and community development office. 4 years ago, we undertook a group of concerned and engaged citizens saw a common denominator that was holding us back, the lack of broadband. And in that group 4 years ago, we had Laura Reynolds and Kate Williamson from the Rangeley region. We had folks down in Jay Livermore and everywhere in between. We applied to the state for funding for a plan, and that was going to be contingent and matched by funding from the towns. So we had to convince every town and plantation, 22 entities, plus the county commissioners that represent 13 unorganized territories. We had to convince or inform everybody about the opportunity for broadband and what that provides for our communities and the challenge of not having it. And so within 6 months, every group of selectmen or assessors came to understand the opportunity and voted to share in the cost of this broadband plan. So here we are today. The plan measured everyone, every address, every 911 address in the county, and identified who has service, who doesn't, and at what level, and what the high level costs would be to get the unconnected connected to a functioning level, exceeding the national or state minimum. And so the data from that plan has attracted providers with their solutions for our towns, in groups of towns. And so here this evening, we have Consolidated Communications, and we have Jeff Nevins, who is the state representative for them. And they have a model that they have executed in New Hampshire and elsewhere with similar qualities or constraints that Rangeley has. And so tonight we're going to hear what their model is and what their proposal is to connect not only the town of Rangeley, but as important, the plantations that are around, so that the whole Rangeley region can be on the map as a place that you can live in and work remotely and perhaps choose to move to, and put your kids in school, or start your businesses. So without further ado, Jeff, also I'd like to introduce our consultant with our plan from the very beginning, Brian Lippold, Casco Bay Advisors. And so Brian's listening in. I'm listening in. Let's hear it from Jeff.
Thank you,
Take it away.
Charlie. Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you all tonight. What I'm going to start with is introducing the folks that are here from Consolidated, because I'm looking at my screen and it looks like it's mostly Consolidated people that are up there. So first of all, we have Rob Custer. Rob is our Vice President of Product Management. We have Ryan Whitlock, who is our Senior Vice President of Operations. We have John Stone, who's Senior Director of Operations. Jeff McIver, who's our Project Manager. Jeff does a lot of work in New Hampshire and Vermont. And we have Sarah Davis, who is Senior Director of Government Relations. And then George Woods is also with us. George is one of our construction managers. So we have a cast of many here, Charlie, and we'll use all the people from Consolidated with the question part of the presentation. Let me start. I think my first trip to Rangeley was about 5 years ago. So this has been a while in coming, and I certainly feel that you folks have done your homework. You were one of the first communities to call on us and come up and talk about what we had and what we had to offer in the communities around the Rangeley area. I want to start a little bit in terms of telling you a little bit about Consolidated, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rob to talk about the model that we've been using in the state of New Hampshire and how we think it will fit in Rangeley. And that will really get into the details, and then we'll be more than willing to answer questions as we go through the presentations. And Charlie, you tell me how you want to handle that, but maybe we go through it and then hold the questions for after. It's up to you.
Well, I know we've got a short time window. We want to be conscious of time, of the selectmen and the assessors, and also of everyone else's. So let's burn through it.
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
And before we get started, if the town could allow me to share my screen, I'll bring up the CCI presentation.
He's working on it currently.
In the interim, Jeff, just go ahead and I'll.
Yeah, Brian, and then you know where we're going to jump when Rob starts, so we'll go there.
All right.
Let me talk a little bit about Consolidated. Consolidated is in 23 states. It's the 10th largest fiber provider in the U.S. We currently have about 3,400 employees, and nearly 700 of those employees are in the state of Maine. We have 8,200 miles of fiber in the state of Maine. The company's a local company. I think most people in the Rangeley area know the name of the technician, and they know him on a first name basis. So we're local. We're here. We live here, and intend to do what we can do to help the Rangeley area meet its goal for broadband and broadband improvement. I think it's a good time for the Rangeley area to be exploring this. And what we're going to talk about is a fiber to the premise network. A lot of things are going on in the Rangeley area with the startup of the mountain. And I also saw where the town of Rangeley is looking at some a TIF district for the downtown area. So it's certainly opportune. You're in a unique position because you'll be one of the first non-island areas in the state to have a fiber to the prem network. It will certainly enhance economic development, will impact the property owners in the area, and it certainly will give the community an advantage over many of the other communities around you. my feeling is it's going to make a already attractive and desirable area more attractive and more desirable. So I think it will make the community much more marketable, and it will put the area in a very strong position to do the things that you want to do. Let me talk a little bit very quickly about what we're going to use as a model. And we've had these types of projects that we're going to propose for the 4 communities: Rangeley Plantation, Sandy River Plantation, and Dallas Plantation. We've done a similar type of projects in New Hampshire. We've completed one, which is in Chesterfield. We have 9 New Hampshire towns that are in the bill process. You can see them there on the screen. I'm not going to read through them. We also have 4 New Hampshire towns who have recently accepted our proposal. And we have another 9 RFPs, at least, probably more since I put this slide together, that are out and pending. So we're also in the final phase of a contract discussion with Long Island, Maine. So this is something that many of the other communities are utilizing. We think it's a good way to upgrade broadband and bring fiber to a community. So we hope you'll consider what we're proposing, and rest assured that we've done it in a number of other communities, and we've done it in a number of them successfully. And Brian, you can flip to the next one, I think. Oop, whoever's in. And this is where I'm going to let Rob start. Rob, go for it. Rob is going to walk through the proposal and how it will work and what we are proposing, the cost and other things. And then after we get done with this, we'll take questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rob Custer. The short version of my title is I'm responsible for all of our consumer products and services. Live in just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire, and spend a lot of time in Maine when it's non-COVID. So good to see you all over Zoom tonight. Before I get into what we're proposing and the funding of the project, I want to spend just a minute to talk a little bit about fiber and what a fiber to the home network does for you. This is probably rehashed for some of you, but I'll do it quickly. And if there's any other questions, we can hit those as we go along. So fiber to the home is very different, is a very different technology than what's being served in the area today. Today, everything that we have out there, whether it's just traditional dial tone or internet access, is served over copper lines. Now, copper is a great technology. You'll hear it denigrated quite a bit, but in the rural environment, it's one of the most cost-effective ways to get service to a lot of people very quickly. But the pace of technology is outpacing the capacity of the copper connection. We've got places today where we're delivering 100 meg over copper, but our equipment needs to be really, really close to do that. Fiber is what we call a future-proof solution. Today, we've got somewhere just under 400,000 fiber connections across the entire company. In Northern New England, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont specifically, it's about a quarter of that. We're growing that every single day. Our goal is to get as many people to fiber as we possibly can. So we do view fiber as a true future-proof solution. One of the big advantages of fiber is that, I don't know if you've ever seen, and this is one of the downsides of Zoom, when we do these live, we actually have fiber we can show you. So imagine a little hair thin strand of almost like a conduit. Fiber transmits data using light. Copper transmits data using electrical impulses. And I love copper, but the storms that we had last weekend, and at least here in New Hampshire, things like wind, rain, age, a split in the copper cable, Sparky the squirrel chewing on one of our cables can cause service degradation where service is up and down. So we spend a lot of time maintaining and troubleshooting copper connections. We love fiber. Fiber is delivered over light. Light is either on or it's off. So in the instance of a cable cut, as an example, troubleshooting and restoration time is much, much, much faster with fiber The guys can go out, it's called an OTDR. It's a device that plugs fiber into it, and it will automatically tell them where the break or the cut in the fiber is. You know, they typically, a machine says it's 452 feet away. They drive 452 feet down the road. They look for the backhoe, and that's generally where the cut's at. Repair the cut, life is up and good again. It's essentially impervious to things like wind, rain, weather. Light doesn't care if it's cold or it's hot. It just continues to run. Fiber as a technology also is where the world is moving. And I'll tell you now, what we're proposing today is 1 gigabit symmetrical. The technology that we would actually employ in Rangeley and the plantations would be the next generation of this technology. What we're delivering today is a technology called GPON, which has a maximum capability of essentially 1,000 meg down and 1,000 meg up, also known as a gigabit service, a gig down and a gig up. The next generation technology that we're already actively working to deploy is called XGS-PON, and it goes 10 times that speed. Now, there's really no legitimate residential use case for 10 gigabit symmetrical service today, but no, that's the future proofing that fiber gives you. The technology that we would install for all of Rangeley and the plantations for every single residential and business location, day one would have the future-proof capability of 10 gigabit symmetrical. And it's going to continue to grow from there. So when we look at fiber to the home networks, honestly, the expensive part is the physical cables up on the poles. The electronics is not terribly expensive. So generally electronics are usually 6 to 10% of the total project cost. It's the physical work of putting brand new cables up and completely overbuilding the existing copper network. That's the expensive part. Once that network's there, then you have the ability, as technology changes, to swap out relatively low cost electronics and just keep moving up the chain. So I'll stop there real quick. Questions on that so far? All right, so what we're proposing for Rangeley and the plantations is a full fiber to the premise network. This would be us coming in over a period of months and putting all new fiber optic cable on the lines. We would put them up in essentially the existing places that the copper network would be today. And for a period of time, we would run both networks, copper and fiber. Ultimately, and this is not a today thing or a tomorrow thing or even a next year or the year after that thing, but ultimately the goal is to incent customers to move over to the fiber network. So at some point we can retire the copper network. That's, again, not a today thing, but that's a long-term goal. The fiber service itself, day one, would be capable of 1 gigabit symmetrical. So that's 1 gigabit down, 1 gigabit up. We'll show you prices here in just a minute. We have a corporate policy of no data caps and no throttling of data. So a data cap is typically, you'll see this with some cable or cell phone connections. If you exceed a certain amount of data transmission over a month, they'll either slow your connection down or they'll charge you additional. We don't do that. Everybody gets full use of the service at all times. We also don't throttle data. We are a proponent of net neutrality. Any lawfully authorized content is more than welcome on our network. So we are strict adherers to allowing the free flow of information and data. We also will offer bundling options. Again, I'll show you pricing for retail services here in a minute, but know that when I show you the pricing, there's all kinds of bundling combinations that are available. In regards to the network design itself, really think about this in two basic elements. If you would move forward with this proposal, the first thing that we would do is build the physical network. And that's, again, us going up and putting up all new wires on the existing attach points across the entire footprint. We would also install new electronics. If you drive around today, you probably see some of our copper hardware that's maybe mounted on a pole somewhere. It's usually 5 or 6 feet off the ground. It's about the size of a dorm fridge for the most part. Fiber optic electronics are about the same size. They serve a very different purpose, but essentially the same size. So we would put all new electronics, all new fiber optic cable in. That establishes the basic network infrastructure. And that's what we consider the network. The second piece of that is the customer connection. So what you get once the network is built is fiber optic connectivity access to the poles closest to the house. When a customer orders service, then we tap into that fiber at the closest pole to the house. We bring the fiber to the house. We mount electronics either on the side of the house or inside the house. More often than not, it's a piece of equipment that goes inside the house. We also provide free wireless equipment as well. So that's the second piece. We call that kind of the drop or the customer premise portion. As a general rule, you can, if you think about cost, and your mileage may vary, but in this specific instance, it's pretty close to the industry average. The cost of the network itself is usually about it's about a half, 50% more to 75% more of the cost of the install itself. So as a rule, the network itself is going to cost $1,000 to $1,500 per home. And the installation portion from the pole to the end user is usually around $1,000 to $1,200 per home. Construction timeline. So the way I believe this would work is if you accept this process and our proposal, the towns would need to go to vote. Then you would go through a financing process. We worked with some municipalities who have gone down a private financing route. We've worked with other, and this is frankly more common, is to go to a municipal bond. The town would either get a municipal bond or get private financing. Once that financing is established, then we would immediately start construction. I'll give you some rough timeframes. And I think Maine, I'll use bonding just as an example today. It's a little bit cleaner than private financing. In the state of New Hampshire, the bond bank issues bonds twice a year. They do it in July and they do it in January. The towns that we've brought through this process already have gone to town vote in March. Once the town vote then is successful, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on behalf of the town to get the bonds, working with bond counsel and all that kind of thing, to get to the point where you can actually go out for bonding. In New Hampshire, the bonds go out in July and funding happens in early August, early to mid-August generally. In the towns that we've worked so far, immediately following that, we begin construction. And actually prior to that, once the town vote is positive, we start assembling all the materials. So you're not waiting for, a million miles of fiber, or a million feet of fiber and a whole bunch of electronics. As soon as the town vote is positive, we assume you're going to get bond financing. So we start assembling all the equipment. So the minute that the financing is secured and authorized by the bond bank, we can immediately begin construction. I'll give you an equivalent, what I think is probably going to be pretty close to an equivalent construction timeline. The city of Rindge, New Hampshire is just a little over 3,200 locations. Rangeley and the plantations are about 3,500, so roughly equivalent. And the number of miles of fiber we need to build would be roughly equivalent as well. Rindge did their vote last March of this year. They received their bond funds at the beginning of August. We immediately began construction. We are now December 7th. We are about a week away from the total backbone network being built. And once the backbone's built, then we have some other work to connect the fibers, install the electronics. Shortly after the first of the year, we'll start turning up the first connections in Rindge. So, by middle to end of Q1, the entire town will be done. So the start of construction was in August, and we'll be essentially pencils down, and everybody in the town will have access probably by mid to late Q1 of next year. Similar timeline probably for Rangeley. I always put the asterisk on this that that assumes equipment and fiber availability. Fiber and equipment are really kind of hard to come by these days. There's a lot of fiber projects that are going on, so we have long lead times on those. COVID didn't help that at all. But with this kind of lead time and knowing that if we're doing a town vote in March, that generally gives us pretty good lead times. Weather's also generally a factor. This is where aerial construction is good. If there's a lot of snow on the ground, a lot of icy conditions, the guys can't work. But once those roads are clear, bucket trucks can get in and they can work in a lot of cases through the snow. So weather doesn't completely knock us out, but it might slow us down just a little bit if we get a really rough winter. So what we're proposing is that the town would bond, we'll talk about the financials here in just a little bit, or get private financing to cover the cost of the network infrastructure. Consolidated Communications would bear the cost for everything from the pole into the customer home. What that means in simple terms is free installation. The end user doesn't pay anything for the installation, assuming that there is a connection from the pole to the house already. And that generally comes in one of two forms. There's either what we call an aerial drop. So the wire comes from the pole over the air, connects to the side of the house, or it's a buried drop. If those exist today, there's no charge to the end user. We run into some rare instances where customers don't have those existing communication paths. And if that happens and it's over private property, the customer would need to do all of the work, and we can help them with that. But there would be some added expense in the instance where a customer didn't have an existing communication path. But if a customer has DSL today, if they have traditional phone service today, 99 times out of 100, that's not an issue. We always work with the residents as we're moving down the path here as well. The town would own the portions of the network that it funds. So we have some facilities in today. The town, anything that the town would fund though, the town would own that. Generally, these agreements are for a period of 20 years. And the way it works is the town funds the network. Actually, if you can flip to the next slide, maybe a better explanation. We'll back up just a little bit. So the network portion that we just talked about for Rangeley and all the plantations is going to be $3.7 million. So it's just a hair over $3.7 million. The customer portion of that from the pole to the home is just under $2.5 million. So what we would propose is the town would get private financing or bond for $3.7 million. That would fund the construction of the network. The town owns that portion of the network. And would for, again, bonds generally are a 20-year cycle. The town would own that for a period of 20 years. The town would give us something called an irrevocable right to use or exclusive access. We would run that network just like we do any other fiber to the home network. If it breaks at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, it's not the town on the hook for fixing it. We're responsible for fixing it. We're responsible for maintaining it. We're responsible for upgrading it. If there's a new home that's built, we're responsible for getting service to that home. If you annex an additional property, we're responsible for getting service to those additional properties. We also would be responsible for everything from the pole into the end user's home. And again, if there's an existing communication path, that's done at no charge for anybody. And that's not a limited time offer. We have a standing, we don't charge for fiber optics for installations. The way this gets paid back then is, and we've done quite a bit of math on this, and we're actually getting pretty good at it. Anybody who subscribes to service, to a data service over the new network would pay normal service rates. So whether they buy 50 meg or 100 meg or 1 gig, whatever that price is, there would be an additional $10 added to their bill every single month. And that would be for the life of the bond or the private financing. That would continue for 20 years. So that $10 then would come to us at every month or every year, depending on how you want to do it. We would pay the town a fixed fee for being given the right to operate the network and run the network for profit. That fee that we pay you is sufficient to offset the cost of the bond principal and interest or the private financing principal and interest, and we contract that and guarantee it in writing. So how we typically do that is, as you move down the path of a bond or private financing, you'll get a statement that says, hey, if you bond for $3.7 million, your 20-year repayment cycle looks like this. So we know what those annual payments are. In the agreement, then we put in that our operating payment to you monthly or annually exceeds that. So you always have the dollars in there, regardless of whether we have one subscriber on the network or we have 100% penetration in the entire property. The town is always covered. So again, let me reiterate that. Anybody who buys a data service on the new network would pay an extra $10 per month over the life of the bond. Again, 20 years or depending on what the private financing is. If a customer has service on the copper network, they don't pay this $10. It's only people who elect to move their service over to the fiber network. Now, we'll incent them to do that because we want to get as many people over as we can. The more customers we have on the network, the less out of pocket that we have to make up that monthly or annual operating cost to the town. So we do all kinds of incentives to get customers moved over. If you have customers that have a traditional access line today and no interest in data service, nothing changes for them. $10 per subscriber only gets charged for those customers who purchase a new data service on the new network. So I'll stop there. Questions? I'll hit one that you're probably already thinking about, because we get this a lot when we talk to towns. What happens after 20 years? Well, what we've typically done, I'm open to discussion on this. What we've typically done, or what we typically assume, is after 20 years, the town is going to go back out to bid again to operate this network. We've had people ask before, will you do a buyout after 20 years? The depreciable life, as a general rule, I think for GAAP, is 30 or 35 years. So there's value in that asset for sure. If a buyout is something you're interested in, we could definitely talk about that. But if I take my CCI hat off for a second, the assumption that we've made is in 20 years and 1 day, the bond's paid off, the $10 user fee goes away, the town owns that portion of the network. So you would have the ability to go back out to bid again. And remember, fiber is a future-proof technology. We hear about SpaceX and wireless and all that. Everything comes back to a wire at some point. Fiber is as future-proof as you're going to get. In 20 years and 1 day, the town issues another RFP, and it says, hey, we want ISPs to come in and bid this network for us. We would be standing probably first in line to go back in again. And at that point, it becomes a profit center for the town, and a revenue generator for the town.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The road that I live on right now currently does not have any broadband access at all. Would you be extending the network there?
We would cover every location for every residence and business. That's the way we've mapped it out.
Okay. And I also have a question for Charlie Woodworth. You had talked about the cost of the backbone to the town and to Consolidated. How do these grants come into play in terms of that cost? My understanding, there was some grants that are being made available.
We've got a current project in the southern part of the county that we're working on that is separate from this project.
Okay, so there are no grants being made available for what we're talking about right now.
Correct.
Okay.
There is, the Connect Maine Authority does have a grant program for areas that meet their qualification that could be used, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, those dollars could be used to reduce the amount that you would have to bond. So, there's multiple ways to go about reducing that 3.7 million. But I think what Rob's talking about today is with the assumption that there would not be any grants available.
All right.
Correct. Yeah.
And
Brian,
one,
you're 100%.
one more question. What normally is the monthly data cost to have data access to your home?
Do you want to flip maybe to the next slide, please? If we can. There we go. Yeah, so these are current prices today, and we've already loaded in the $10 fee. We call it an infrastructure fee. So right now, and these, one of the things that we agree to and willingly in our agreements is that we're not going to get you in a position where you agree to do this, we move down the road, and in 2 years we bring the rates way up, right? So we will always guarantee that the rates in Rangeley and the plantations will be the same rates that they are in the state of Maine. We don't do in Maine any municipal sensitive pricing, any of that kind of thing. So this is a general average. I would use this as windage more than anything else. It's based on a 2-year term. It also includes everything else, right? So if you want our wireless router, there's a charge for that. If you don't want to use our wireless router, you don't have to do that. Taxes are not included in this because those do vary from location to location, what gets billed. We are in the process right now of moving this around a little bit, I will tell you, and the rates are going to go down instead of go up. So I would use this as pretty much your high water mark.
Okay, thank you.
Would you perceive Rangeley as the municipality that would get the bond for all four, for the 3 plantations and Rangeley, or would it be divided between the plantations and Rangeley? And how would that, and you would compensate the plantations as well as Rangeley?
Well, let me clarify the question. It's a little bit hard to hear. So was the question how we would do the compensation back, or was it how the plantations in Rangeley would bond?
Because there's 4 municipalities involved versus just one, would you contract with one or all 4?
That may be a better question for Charlie or Brian to answer. I know what I think, but they may have better information than I do.
Sure.
Rob, this is Daryl Sterling, Economic Development Consultant for Rangeley. I have a couple thoughts here. One, with the grants, there are a few pizza slices available, a combination with Connect Maine Authority, USDA Rural Development, Northern Border Region Commission, and possible EDA. So there are some funding mechanisms that could subsidize part of the cold hard costs of borrowing. So my job is to pursue all of those. And I take it you must have worked in New Hampshire with Carol Miller, the state director, on a number of projects. And so I've contacted her and Peggy Schaefer, of course, Connect Maine Authority in Maine. And one of the other things when we look at subsidizing this through a combination of factors, have you factored in Saddleback at all, as well as the towns and the plantation? Saddleback mostly is Sandy River Plantation, of course, but when we look at that mix of the—
Daryl,
yeah,
let me interrupt, please. The question is from Kate Williamson, is Rangeley going to apply for the bond for all of the communities, or are they going to apply individually for their share?
I don't think that's been determined yet, Steve, because we have to get everybody on board. We can do it as a regional interlocal agreement through Rangeley. If the plantations are on board, Rangeley can be the prime applier of these funds for sure, yes.
Okay, can we get a clarification from the Consolidated's experience? Tell us what you're experiencing in other communities.
So I'll give you my shot. Every one of these that we've done so far has been with individual municipalities. We have contemplated in a couple of instances the creation of utility districts or things like that. Frankly, we could do it either way. We probably would want to get some legal guidance on exactly the best way to do that. And again, Charlie and Brian, I don't know if you have a better answer than that, but I think it can be done either way. It's probably what's most conducive for the municipalities.
Correct. It can be done. It can be done either way. So the Maine Municipal Bond Bank recognizes broadband utility districts. We could create one with the 4 communities, and so it'd be one entity being bonded.
And I do have a follow-up question. If Rangeley were a go on this and maybe 1 or 2 of the plantations, but not all 3, would that change your proposal?
It would, but I can't tell you what it would be unless you gave me the specific instance. So when we look at the network, we look at all of those together as one. I think one of the previous slides showed you what they would be for all of them individually, and it was, I think, $1.5 million or $2 million higher, something in that range. So if one of the areas chose to exclude, we would have to redo the math because the dollars per passing does change a little bit, but we could do that fairly easily if you had a specific example you wanted us to look at.
Okay, Daryl, I stepped on you. Do you have anything more you want to finish up with?
No, this is really good conversation, good feedback, because my job is to try to find the funding and figuring out what governance that we'll use, what entity, if it's going to be a combination of all of the above or some of the above, and figure out the quickest way to get it moving.
Okay, let me make sure everybody in the room has no more questions. Mark, do you have anything? No, Cindy?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
got a question regarding, once the 20 years is up, okay, you touched on this briefly, about, the town retaining ownership and going out for an RFP. Why would we not want to sell the network back to you?
You could, yeah, and that's something that we would entertain. I can tell you, we've had this discussion with most of the other towns, and most of them saw it as an opportunity to drive non-tax based revenue. in a 20-year cycle. So if you look at what the annual rate would be on each of these, it's a fairly substantial amount of money. So if you have no interest in continuing that, that's definitely something we can look at through the contract process.
So, I mean, but you're collecting money from the customers, okay? And so how would Rangeley benefit financially? We would just contract a per home fee that you would reimburse us for, or I mean, what does that look like structurally for a moneymaker for a municipality after the bond is paid?
Yeah, usually the way it's done before, and we've done these a couple of times and gone down this path, probably 3 or 4 in the last 10 years or so, where generally it's a municipality or an entity that has built a network and then realizes that it's a lot of work and they don't want to mess with it anymore. So they want somebody to come do the management and the end user subscriber billing and the tech support and all those types of things. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but generally it's done on a valuation of what the annualized recurring revenue is. So it's fairly easy to get to that math, and that usually is the way it's done. Although I have seen some instances, and this is probably more applicable for this instance, where the town would just issue an RFP that says, hey, what's it worth to you to run this network for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever period of time you choose, and let the providers do that valuation on their own and pick the best one.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Hold on. Yes.
What happens if CCI gets bought out by somebody else in the middle of this agreement?
That's a great question. It's a good question. I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to probably answer what you're really asking. So the agreements that we have, and we'll provide you with a sample of the agreements that we've used in the past. We're more than happy to give you a genericized version of those that you can look at. The agreements that we have today have assignment clauses in them. So if we would get bought or something would happen, they would automatically assign over and nothing would really change, frankly. It would just be a new entity. The question that we get a lot is what happens if we file for bankruptcy? And you have to put a little bit of context about what we do for a living. So one of the things that we are as an entity is something, and this is a legal term, it's called provider of last resort. So we are required to provide basic telephone service to a whole lot of folks. And that obligation doesn't go away whether or not we would file bankruptcy. In those instances, what's typically happened in the industry is, Windstream right now. So Windstream is in our space, Frontier is in our space. They've recently gone through bankruptcy or going through bankruptcy filings. Typically what happens in that space is the company doesn't stop providing service because they have to continue to provide service. Both the FCC, the state PUCs, there's a lot of governing bodies that require that. So what typically happens is the organization is put in a receivership. So somebody else is running the organization. Frankly, I don't think anything changes from a day-to-day operational perspective. In the worst case scenario, what you'll see in the agreement is the town has the ability to do an opt-out. So if we would default on this agreement in any way, shape, or form, including a bankruptcy default, the town would have the ability to say, nope, we're done. We want to go find another ISP to pick up and take this network over. And when we provide you detail, get a little bit further down the road, we'll show you network diagrams on exactly how this network is designed. It is literally designed to be able to unplug and plug into another provider if you want. So we've done it that way specifically to give towns the comfort that whether it would be a bankruptcy proceeding, and we're doing great right now. We just actually refinanced any of our outstanding debt to about 7 or 8 years down the road. But 20 years is a long time. Anything can happen. But we designed these networks really specifically to try to give you comfort that in the event that that would happen, you would be able to pick another provider if you chose to go that way. Or at the end of 20 years, we're not tying you up into something you can never extract yourself from. It really is designed to be modular. So if for some reason there would be another provider in, it's a plug and play.
Rob, Daryl.
Hold on, please. Hold on. Ellie? Go. Go. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen.
Oh, hang on. Keith, right here.
My question is understanding the presentation in front of us. Geographically, with the 4 plantations or communities together, and not knowing your boundaries of current fiber opportunities. What happens to fit communities between the plantations and where your current fiber lines are stopped? Is there a benefit to those guys based on this potential agreement? Or do they capitalize on this from our move forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Brian and Jeff might be able to provide you a better answer. I can tell you that one of the things that we do get pretty regularly when we build towns is these networks don't fit perfectly inside town boundaries. In a lot of cases, we have primary gear or fiber and it comes in from another location. One of the things that we do get hit up pretty regularly on is, hey, I see you're building fiber past my house to get to Ringe, New Hampshire. Can you connect me? Generally, we tell those customers, we're going to build the town first because that's our first commitment, right? We have a commitment to the town. We want to get them built. Once that's done, then we're going to go back and look at what other opportunity there is. Now, is there opportunity to roll other locations in? I mean, Brian or Jeff, do you have a little clearer perspective on that?
Quickly.
I did not hear the question clearly, but what we had provided to Consolidated was all of the locations and all the roads that needed to be served within those 4 towns or plantations. And so in this case, I think it is a fairly contained network. Yeah, you are coming up from the south to feed into the network, but for these 4, it would be fairly self-contained.
You clear with that? We good?
Can I ask Keith's question for him? Because I think I know what he wants to know. So I think correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, I think what he wants to know is if we spend $3.5 million, whatever it is, to get this up here, and we stop at Lower Dallas, and then the next plantation is Langtown, and you guys keep running off of that, what's the benefit to us for spending all that money for another township next door to us to continue off what we just built?
So that's part of it, yes. And let's say right now, fiber, keep it simple, fiber stops at Phillips Hill. And then all of a sudden we tell them you're big fiber over the hill on Route 4. And it's now, you have Madrid and such for other residents from Phillips to Finger Plantation that potentially could benefit from this. So by us paying $3.7 million, there's a potential benefit to these customers that gives them a cost up front aside from their monthly service. It's kind of my take on that.
Do you all get that?
I think I heard what you were saying, but their cost is to serve just these 4 communities. While they could extend off of this to serve other towns, there's no real financial benefit that is created by you going first. I'd have to look at the map to see if there are some adjacent towns that would be natural to build off of, but I don't think there is.
All right, I'm going to move on to some other questions, but I do want you to sharpen your pencil, because if we pay the downstroke to bring it here, and then other communities on the outside of the Rangeley region are allowed to tap into that system without helping us pay the upstroke, that isn't beneficial to Rangeley. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think one thing you will see, and I need to go back to look at the maps, but my history on these has been most of the backbone fiber is already there. So what we're building are what we call laterals. So it's getting into the neighborhoods down the side streets. And we can definitely look to see if there's any advantage for sure. But in most cases, there's not, because that backbone already exists. We're building off some existing facilities. But
Okay,
we'll look at
there's
it.
a lot of business people in Rangeley that won't miss this one, believe me. Kate, you had a question?
But besides the finances, is there any facilities that are required from Rangeley or the plantations, or are all the facilities going to be consolidated facilities for equipment and?
Did you get that?
Yeah, I think I did. Let me repeat it back to you, make sure it's right. Are there any other facilities that the town would need to purchase to affect the network, or will Consolidated provide everything necessary?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we will. So again, think of it in 2 elements. The fiber and the electronics is the 3.7. That's the network portion. And then the end user portion is the connection to the customer home, the electronics and the labor to do that install. And that would be ours. Those two things combined will give you a complete end-to-end 1 gigabit capable symmetrical network.
So the current buildings that you have servicing the copper and the fiber that currently exists will be sufficient to upgrade this system, correct?
Correct, they will. We will place additional electronics, but it's all included in the quote.
Yeah, in terms of facilities, is that it?
Yeah, no additional buildings.
Okay, I'm gonna march around the room one more time. A newcomer, any questions, Dennis? You also? Okay. Anybody else in the room?
Yeah, Stephen, one last question for Rob and his team. Do you have a sample CCI agreement with the assignment clause? And do you have anything similar to cable franchise agreements where there is some revenue sharing involved with this that maybe we can look at with our select board and assessors leadership of the towns and the plantations?
Yeah, we do have an agreement that we will provide. Jeff will send that over. He'll send a sample agreement. We have not done revenue share on these. The $10, frankly, is not going to cover our cost for the first 5 or 10 years. We're barely break even on that $10. I mean, we would entertain a revenue share, but the $10 would have to increase.
Okay.
So we're all set here in the room? Okay, in Zoom land, anybody else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For CCI, do you have a minimum subscriber commitment that you expect to make this plausible to anticipate the cost that you're projecting on your sample fiber home pricing?
Yeah, Linda, that's a great question. We typically assume 40% penetration. So over time, it won't be day one. Over time, though, usually it's a period of years. We'll get around 40 or 50% of the total population. You know, there's always the outliers. That's what we base our business case on. What you'll see in the agreement, though, is we insulate the town from that. So the town gets paid regardless of whether there's one subscriber on the network or 100%.
Okay. And the other question I was wondering, in the written materials that we were provided initially, you talked about 150-foot free installation from pole to home. And then earlier you were speaking about free installation for your current customers switching over to the fiber. A lot of the areas that we have do not have internet service. So what is an anticipated cost per meter or per foot to run your equipment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, and everybody gets kind of confused by this. If there's an existing, what we call a communication path. So if we can take a single wire and run it from the pole to the house, doesn't matter if it's 150 feet or more, we're going to do that at no cost. If there are poles, it's long enough where you have poles and those poles already exist on private property, we'll run on that with no additional charge. If there's a conduit under the ground, so if you have buried facilities and that conduit it can't be inside of electrical conduit, it's got to be a communication conduit only. And we can provide you with the specs for that. If that exists already, we'll run through that, you know, at no additional charge. The only time an end user would run into an additional charge is if those don't exist. So we're talking about the end user's private property. So they've never had any type of telecommunication service in their house, be it cable TV or internet or TV or phone service at all. So those don't exist. The end user might have to bring in somebody to put a buried conduit in their ground or to put some poles up. We won't charge the end user to run the cable over the top of that as long as the path is there. And those costs vary.
Excellent, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So, if the town of Rangeley does the total, does the bond for Rangeley and the surrounding plantations, my assumption is that infrastructure fee from those plantations would come to the town of Rangeley to cover that cost. And also, second part is, if we get any amount of grant money, my guess is that infrastructure fee would be reduced from $10 to what? I mean, would it be prorated?
Rebecca, those are great questions. So I'll take the first one, the second one first. So yes, if we can get any grant money or any additional subsidization, we would cut that 3.7 million down. It would 100% go towards the cost of the network. We would still bear the 2.5 million for end user connections on us. So we would not use it to reduce that. In regards to the infrastructure fee, it does not go to the town. It actually comes to us. So the way the agreements are set up is that essentially we're leasing the network from the town. So the town pays to build the network. We pay a lease payment every month or every year, depending on how you want it, to the town, and that lease payment will offset your annual principal and interest for your bond or private financing.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
We lost you, Rebecca. Go ahead.
She said thanks. She's done.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Laura Reynolds. I have a question.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Go ahead.
Kind of a follow-on to Linda's. If your assumption is that 40% of the community will subscribe, if it actually turns out to be 60 or 70, since you're really the only game in town, will the $10 go down?
Yeah, Linda, that's a great question. There's two ways that we've handled it in the past, and this is something we like to typically talk to the town about. What we can do is project that forward, right? Over time, typically if you do the bonding route, typically bonds will, the repayment schedule on the bonds goes down over time. So what we've typically recommended to town, so that payment is going to decrease as time goes on. What we typically recommend to towns is one of two ways. The first is we can cost average that over the period of time. So once we see what your estimated financing rates are going to be, and this is something we would do collectively with you because we see these as long-term partnerships. 20 years is a long time. So we can either set that rate fixed lower day one. So if if we collectively decide, hey, we would rather have a fixed fee for a lower amount over that total 20 years, we can do that once we see the full financing numbers. The second option, and we haven't had any town elect, we may have had one or two towns elect this. The second option is to set a revisit schedule. So every 2 years, every 3 years, we sit back down with the select board and say, okay, this is what the numbers look like. These are what the repayment looks like for the next 5 years. This is how many subscribers we have in service. We true up the infrastructure fee and we adjust the rate accordingly. Based on the math that we've done, we typically expect to see that fee go down by about 50 cents every 2 or 3 years. So if we go down the let's reset it every few years path, we typically recommend doing that every probably 3 to 5. But yeah, we're happy to entertain that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. How about from the board? Joe, Cindy? Yes, all set? Thank you very much for the presentation.
I don't know if they have anything else. It says Chesterfield summary. Have they done that?
Don't know.
Jeff, that was backup materials, right?
Yeah, if I heard,
yep.
I will provide the bond funding Q&A, the sample contract, and the Chesterfield summary.
Okay.
That's coming.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, we'll bring this public hearing to a close. Appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Darrell.
Thank you.
Back up. It is time for the Pledge of Allegiance, ladies and gentlemen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wow, the board changed. Look at that. Welcome everyone to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We'll open this meeting at 1 minute after 6. If you could join me, please, for a moment of silence for men and women in uniform and folks that are fighting this terrible pandemic. Thank you. Cindy, thanks for opening up with the public hearing. I'm sorry I was late. For those of you who weren't here, a good public hearing on consolidated communications presentation. It'll be interesting to see how the plantations receive this. I hope that with open arms.
certainly important to everybody in the region. Adjustments to the agenda. We're going to get an update from our local health officer. Sitting over here to my right, Lindsay, welcome.
Hi. Okay, so obviously we've had a lot of activity, I guess I should say, in the past few weeks. Currently, as it stands today, there are 8 positive cases with 2 presumptive, and there are the 2 previous that we have had just recently have finished their isolation period. So right now we're at 8. We could really count it as 10 because we have the 2 presumptive ones who are symptomatic. And when I say presumptive, it's they had tested negative originally, but now are showing symptoms. So they would be a presumptive positive, and they'll just isolate for 10 days. And I am talking to that family. We have a high number of residents who are in quarantine based on their close contact, or there are a number of them that are awaiting test results. Some had to wait, up to 5 days to be tested per protocol for their businesses or whatever it may be. So we had some people who weren't able to be tested until today based on their close contact last week. So I'm hoping that we don't end up with more cases this week out of that, but there's just no guarantees there. So that's where we currently are at. I did send an email to our district liaison through the CDC and for health officers for Franklin County. Unfortunately, they are on vacation, but somebody else did reach out to me. She said it seems like she was very, actually probably shocked, I think, to hear from me, but was just that, the only thing we can really do going forward is to just keep reinforcing the safety guidelines. And she did mention the possibility for applying for the Keep Maine Healthy funding, which at one point it was discussed over the summer. But I don't know that we really decided if we needed to. I don't want to speak for, as far as Tracy, I don't know, over the summer, I think before Joe got here, as far as if we needed any help with like masks for businesses and, funding for hand washing stations and things like that. I don't know if we ever applied for any of that.
I think Mike Bacon got us a grant through
Okay.
something, I don't remember the name of it specifically, but that did offset all of that as well as the class for the, do you remember the name of it?
No, okay. So it might have been either COVID funds or this specifically to work, if we needed to. I mean, we could put something out to businesses to see if they needed any support, but I feel like a lot of them really have their PPE and are really trying their best. However, there's new guidelines in place that went into effect on Friday, which has caused some confusion, but they have taken the quarantine from 14 days down to 10 days from last exposure. And then for the remaining 4 days, you would just have to monitor for symptoms. And then if you develop symptoms, then you would have to, call back your provider or whatever that may be. The other big change, and this is where I will probably have to ask the public for their help, is that because of the overwhelming amount of cases in the state, they are no longer assigning case investigators or contact tracers to every positive case. They have put them into specific categories based on risk and information that is submitted on their lab reports. So therefore, a case investigation with a true contact tracer will only go for people 18 and younger, or those 65 and older, healthcare or first responders, those that are being hospitalized, those that are disabled, congregate facilities like nursing homes, prisons, those type of facilities, or schools and daycares. So that, with that being said, it means that we have to rely on people to notify their own close contacts. They will be called by they have renamed them to a case notifier. So those case notifiers now will call them, say that they're positive, give them information on isolation and resources, and then that's it. So, obviously there's a risk with that, because are people going to truly know when to go back, and will they really be able to remember all their close contacts and do it on their own? So I guess, in my next statement that I put out, I'm just going to encourage them to do that, and that if they are positive and they just don't know what to do and how to do it, that they reach out to me, and I'm happy to help them if they're willing to do that. So I feel like that's really all that I can offer at this point for them. So that's what I got.
It's a lot.
It has been pretty busy. There's a
Joe,
lot
you
of-
have anything? Mr. Haley?
Thank you.
One of the things that I just want to bring a couple of you up to speed, for those of you who are here and out in Zoom land, the reason we can't get specific case officers is, as of last Monday, there's 77,000 anonymous calls. They cannot respond to everything that they're getting. And they don't know if there's validity to them. They don't know. So the overwhelming amount of calls they're getting has reduced their ability, obviously. You mentioned the other case people. They've now brought on retired nurses to go in and handle specific caseloads. So it's getting crazy.
Yeah, as far as, for those of you who don't know, I am the nurse at school, obviously, and we were told at one point that they weren't sure if we would even have somebody assigned to us in schools, which luckily we're a small school, so that is very helpful for us, work to our advantage. But now we have that because of these retired nurses that are coming to work and help, and have been very helpful with the positive cases that we have had associated with school. So.
Okay, the other thing I want to mention is that we're very lucky to have Lindsay working with us in close ties as she is. Because as you may or may not know, some of you have children in school and understand the spill-off ramifications of this thing, but could you just tell us about the school situation?
We have had, or not had to, but we have made the decision as administration to go remote a couple of times. And out of an abundance of caution, luckily we have not had to this, to this point, we have not had somebody that was actively positive in school where it has affected other students or staff members at this time. But we do have students who have been positive outside, or have been close, and staff who have been close contacts of those. So just mostly due to staffing of close contacts and other things, we have had to go remote for the safety for everybody, because there's just so many unknowns. And this last time, this surge right here that we seem to be having, there's a lot of unknowns as to how far it was reaching and what would be coming back into the building. So
what can we as a town do to help you in your endeavor and to protect our community? Maybe not in that order, but.
Honestly, I feel like there has been a lot of support, and I feel like businesses and community members have been trying to the best either that they believe or that they can with what they have for resources. And, I guess I just ask that we just continue to be diligent about doing the safety guidelines. There are those people who cannot wear a mask for one way or another, and I understand that. But if it comes down to whether you believe in it or not, I just ask that you think about everybody else that it could affect. And just know that we're all working really hard. And now with this new not being assigned contact tracers, just that there's the stigma of being a COVID positive case at this point is what it is. And I just hope that you can be upfront and honest with the people who you've been in contact with, if not at least me, so that I can keep a pulse on it, and just reassure them that like it's a confidential thing. I mean, I have not shared with anybody here who my positive cases have been when we assess the situation. And so just know that at the schools, you know, I, as a registered nurse, and most times in this position as health officer, you don't have somebody that is held to that standard. So there is a level of professionalism there that I just hope people will trust that I can maintain. So that was that.
Anything?
Thank you. Is there any, the public notices you put out are great. Is there any other way you would like them distributed or posted? I mean, at this point, they're on the website in both post offices.
No, I think as long as they continue to be where it's accessible for those who don't have social media. So the post office and the website, somebody has asked me who's not on there, how they can see them, and that's where I told them that they are. So I think as long as we at least maintain those two places. I don't know about Aquasic. Does it go out into the Aquasic post office as well? Both of them? Okay. So, and
I think Cindy brings up a good point. I don't think it's right for you to give out your cell phone number, but if there is an email address that could be added to these postings.
they're on, it's on there.
There is?
Mhm.
Okay. You can tell I haven't read it.
Well, that's because we just talked.
Even I speak on the phone so often, I don't need to read those things.
I think it's just important to know that I do not give out my cell phone number unless I need to. So if you do call the town office, they do give me the message and I will call you back. I try to separate
no.
a little
Lindsay
bit.
has another job up there at the school, so we appreciate your help. Yes, Dennis?
That's what I
Yeah,
know.
I'd just like to echo what you said. I think we're very fortunate to have you, Lindsay, being our health officer. And along with that, I'd like to ask you a question about, and because a lot of people don't understand how testing is going on in Rancho. Where to get the test, when you should get the test, and those kinds of things.
I did put that in, not this last letter, but the letter before, and I think I re-shared it in this one, but I can put it out again. As far, you know, if you're, and just a quick summary is if you are a patient of the health center, you can get tested whether you are symptomatic or asymptomatic, meaning you're having symptoms or not having symptoms. If you are not a patient of the health center, then they will see you if you are having symptoms and have potentially been exposed. Other than that, you would have to call your own primary care provider to find out. There are testing sites sponsored through the state, throughout the state. The two closest to us happen to be the Walgreens in Rumford and the one in Farmington. So some of them do have a price associated with them, but it seems as though once you actually submit your insurance or you do it, there hasn't been a cost. So. And if you have any questions about it and you don't have internet access and you want to know, you can always call 211 and they will help you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you coming in. Anything else? Good. Okay. Again, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other adjustments to the agenda, Joe?
The only thing, Mr. Chair, is under number 12, there will be a reference when you go into executive session. It's slightly different than what's on the paperwork. There's one letter change. Other than that, no.
Everybody get that? Okay. All right. Motion to approve the minutes of November 16th.
Make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes for the Board of Selectmen for Monday, November 16th, 2020, with any corrections.
Second. Any changes, corrections? All in favor? Thank you. Joe, before we go any farther, I'm sorry. I should have started this meeting off with that. Although we missed this first meeting, and I was tardy for the public hearing, I would like to just take a minute to thank David Haley for stepping up and running for the position. I want to thank the other candidates who ran for the same position, showing their interest in keeping our town on the right path. David Haley won, and we'd like to welcome you to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you being on board. And since you've already raised your hand, it's the first time in a long time I've written down 5-0. 5-4, it hasn't been there for a while. Welcome. Anything on public? Just.
I don't think you can write 5-0 down.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah,
He voted for it. I'm writing it down. End of story.
No, but it was a good point.
You're right.
Wasn't
He's
here.
right. And he would have to correct me after all of that. You know, we could have let this one to the end, but public to speak. Anybody have anything? Yes, Mr. Marquis.
Yes, in light of what Lindsay was talking about, and you asked a very good question about what the town can do. I have a suggestion for the selectmen. I would think that this year, the selectmen would vote to waive their requirement to get petition signatures for the donation accounts. It's really tough to go around and ask people, they're not answering their doors, to try to get people to sign petitions just so that we can get our 60 names on that petition, just so that we can appear on the ballot. The thing is that if you do the math, this requires over 600 interactions that you have to make with people in order to get these signatures. And most of these nonprofits are not up to speed with online petitioning where you can sign a petition online. So for this year only, I would like the stipulation be that they only need to give you a letter with the amount requested to be placed on the ballot. That way we could forego getting all these signatures in this COVID thing.
Thank you. Tell you what, we'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting. We'll give everybody some time to think it over between now and then.
Well, you're requiring everybody to do it by January 1st.
Yeah, well, we're still, yeah, we've got time for the next meeting.
So people are out there, if you say yeah, if you say no, they've got very few days to get all these signatures.
Let's start on the board. What do you think? I'll get to you, Mark.
I think there's good logic to it.
There's what?
I think there's good logic to it.
Okay.
I've had a couple of nonprofits call and state it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. You know, I know that the RFA has been out there, you know, in front of the post office. I saw, you know, Val out there once, but again, you know, people are sharing a pen and
Nice.
the close proximity and, you know, there is, you know, at this point, there aren't, you don't have to witness every signature. So there, I think the Snowmobile Club has a, their petition at Lakeside Convenience for people to sign, but there's no room for any others there.
No, you can't go in there now.
Yeah, and so
So you're in favor of the idea?
I am,
Okay.
to a certain degree, just this absolutely being the only time, I just.
Okay. How do you feel?
Yeah,
Joe?
I agree with 100%. It's just a waste of everybody's time.
Okay. You got a question?
I was just gonna say, I don't know if there's a written in ordinance or policy that deals with that, and that, you know, it would just be good to check on that to make sure it's something that you're legally allowed to do, that the selectmen can do. I'm just mentioning it for a procedural thing and not,
Yeah. Joe, do you have any idea about this?
I would have to double check whether it's in the ordinance or not. I don't know offhand, but that is a very good point.
All right, then I'd entertain a motion that said that we'd approve this provided it's legal.
Yeah.
Make that motion.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Any feelings? All in favor? Thank you.
I just want to say, I know the history of this. I was involved in that. It was a budget committee that requested these positions be signed, and the selectmen voted on it themselves. It's not law. It hasn't been legislated by the town. It's been a vote by the selectmen. All the selectmen have to do is change.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is, by the way, is for 1 year,
Just this current year.
just this year. We good on that, Tracy?
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think that'll go a long way
Yep.
to,
Thank you, Dennis, for bringing it up. Anything in public to speak? Nope. Mark, do you have anything? How about in Zoom land? We have Laura Reynolds. Anything under public to speak?
I'm good, thanks.
Kayla Alexander,
I'm good, thank you.
Rebecca and her husband.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good. We'll move on. Boards and committees, you have the, can you give a little clarification on that since you were involved in that meeting, Joe, with Rico?
Sure.
Little update, because there's some things in there that I think were kind of important you talked about.
Let me get the notes and refresh my memory.
I'd asked Shelley, but she wasn't able to make that meeting, so you've been busy.
So, well, Kate's here too, but one of the things that the committee had talked about recently was the holiday banners. And I believe Don, is it Don Fields gonna work with Keith from Public Services to start to look at what types of banners we might be interested in proposing to you going forward. We talked about the TIF public hearing, which is tomorrow evening. The CCI proposal, which took place tonight. And they were looking at budget proposals, and Kate did bring, she did bring the numbers to the last meeting, which was Friday. So these are the minutes from the meeting before that. One of the other things that the committee talked about, which comes up in your agenda later this evening, Mr. Chairman, is a streetlight proposal too. So they've talked about that in a couple of their meetings. So you'll see that later tonight. But that's kind of a synopsis of what they worked on the 13th.
Okay, congratulations on being the chair. Job you always wanted. Thank you for the update. Any questions? Okay. Consent items, liquor license.
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor license renewal submitted by Heller Catering, doing business as the 45th Parallel Wood Fire Grill.
Second. Moved and seconded. Everything was dotted and crossed, all set. Any questions? All in favor? Go move. Move, Sally.
Make a motion to approve the liquor license renewal for Moose Alley Operations LLC as presented.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Thank you. Downtown Reserve for Wright Pierce, $683.
Make a motion that we approve the invoice submitted by Wright Pierce to be paid out of the downtown reserve account in the amount of $683.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? You have a question? You all set?
Who oversees this is like, they're working for like, Kate's group, it's down this, Great PS. Oh, that's TIF, that's something different.
Yeah. All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Wright Pierce, $675.
Make a motion to approve the invoice submitted by Wright Pierce in the amount of $765.67 to be paid out of the downtown reserve account.
Wait.
I'm sorry, $675.67.
Yep.
Second. I was just mentioning the account because I thought the consulting was the TIP consulting account that was separate than the downtown reserve. I'm probably wrong, so I'm just.
What?
So, Mr. Chair, there was a question about there being a TIF consultant account, which is correct. The TIF consultant who's Alyssa Tibbetts is being paid separately. These are from the downtown. These are updates related to TIF conversations the board has had that are related to the downtown revitalization plan. So the map had to be updated. That's why it's coming from that reserve, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Next up, quitclaim deed, book 2767, page 94.
I'll make a motion that we approve the municipal quitclaim deed for Kelly O'Neill, formerly known as Kelly Grant, as it pertains to the lien certificate recorded at book 2767, page 94.
Second. Any questions? All in favor? Thank you. Next one.
I'll make a motion to approve the municipal quitclaim deed releasing Elizabeth Schur's lien recorded at book 4009, page 343.
Second?
I have a question for you, and this is probably something that I should know, but I couldn't remember. If you look at that one and go down the middle of the page, it says, the said inhabitants of the municipality, and it goes on to say, a former selectman, 2 times in this document.
Cindy pointed that out before the meeting. I don't create these, but I fixed the one that you're gonna sign. It's
Okay.
actually correct.
All right, I just wanted
I
to,
didn't
that
catch
shouldn't be.
until- Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep. All right, any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Correspondence. Have anything, Joe?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have a couple here. I'm gonna make them real quick. We have a letter from the Kennebago Lake Camps Association. They contributed $500 to the ambulance, and it says, to the town manager, Rangeley, Maine, on behalf of the Kennebago Lake Camps Group, I am pleased to enclose our annual gift in support of emergency ambulance and fire services, so vital to the safety of all in the area. Best wishes, David. I can't read it. Want to let you know about that. Secondly, we have
Which end of the lake is that on?
Kennebago Lake on the Bud Russell side.
The Bud Russell, okay.
Bud Russell side. For those who know geography of the Bud Russell side. I've gotten these in the past, and I've been scolded that I didn't at least notify you. Got a personal letter from Molly Mahini about Jehovah Witness, and I'm leaving it here for all of you if you'd like to read it. I have mentioned it in the notes, in the minutes. We're all out in Zoom land. Any old business, Joe?
No, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else under old business? Okay. We heard from Consolidated Communications. I don't think we have any action for tonight.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to put that on the agenda as a placeholder in case the board wanted to have any follow-up, if you wanted to schedule a follow-up meeting. I noticed the plantations were, some of them were there, but there were some that were missing. I don't know if you wanted to have a follow-up meeting between you and the plantations to kind of share what we've learned and see what their feeling is. That would be my thought on that.
Yeah, I had that on my notes to talk about later. Well, let's talk about it now. Should we, take the bull by the horns here and schedule a meeting with as many assessors
Yeah.
that will attend?
I think speed it up.
Okay. Go ahead, Kate.
I had a question from the presentation. He was talking about New Hampshire being July and January for bond distribution and a March, vote. So is that the same in Maine?
No, I don't think so.
The bond bank is.
July and
My
January?
memory shows, isn't that correct?
I don't remember.
It's twice a year, Mr. Chair. I can't remember the months. Rebecca may remember the months offhand, but it's 2 times a year.
Rebecca, do you know when the bond bank issues their, what time of the year?
It's spring and fall. I just don't know the exact month.
Oh, spring and fall.
Well,
I think it's like April.
just something to consider when you're thinking about this.
Well, we'll have to have all that information when we get that meeting together, because timing is gonna be a crucial ingredient, no question, Kate.
That's what I'm suggesting, yeah.
Yep. Follow you. So, you wanna take a look at the calendar and make some offering dates? Stick around, Kate, because you're gonna be part of that.
Just tell me when to be there.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. And I'd hate to pick a calendar, I really would. Obviously, we're into January, right?
I mean,
Maybe.
we could try for a discussion at 5 on the 4th, just before our, our first meeting and.
Well, just let me throw this out. We get into the 4th, and if we've got to make an application to the bond bank for a spring issuance, we may only have a month or two to get it together. I should ask Daryl that tonight. So what about the end of December, like pick a Wednesday? Is a Wednesday a bad day? Before the New Year's, so we can get everybody together, and then on the 4th, we can make some decisions with the public in Rangeley?
The 30th, are you thinking?
I think that, I can't tell.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, 30th, yep. What's everybody's thoughts on that?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah. You good with it?
5 p.m.
Okay, let's set up the invites, and if the majority say they can't come, then obviously we'll be spinning our wheels.
Yeah, if they say they can't come, have them suggest.
Okay. Yeah.
Can't.
Yep. How about if we provide cheese and crackers? Okay,
And there's COVID.
I can't hear you.
With the COVID, I don't know. Just it.
We could put little
No,
plates.
you put them in a little baggie? Okay,
Professional
that'll be
skater
good.
knows how to do that, just call me. Okay, anything else, Joe? Very good. Rangeley Firemen's Association Transfer Station Lot, Dennis.
2019, the town board to give us a piece of land at the transfer station. We have yet to receive that. We're hoping that you'll hire a survey it out and write us a deed, give us a deed.
So we have a letter from your president, Harold Schetzel here, you'll all receive that as well. Yep. What do you want to do?
I recommend get it done.
What's that?
I hire Dave Janney and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, the voters approved it, so let's, move forward and I guess, because in order for, a legitimate purchase and sale agreement to be signed, you need a property description.
Yep.
You can't, we have to obviously prove ownership before we can, use it for any collateral.
Yeah, they're not gonna.
All right, I volunteer to go with Joe and Dennis and Harold if you'd like to go and bring we could hire, who pays for the survey? And how do we pay for
The
it?
proposal, Mr. Chair, I believe is that the town would pay for the survey. I believe that's what they're asking or proposing to do.
All right. So let's get him organized and I'll go up with you guys and anybody else who wants to come.
Keep us up to speed on just about where the piece of land is. We've been up there with that.
Yeah, I want to make sure both you and Harold are there so that there's, yep.
You just give me all the land.
Okay. You want to take care of that, Joe, and give us a time frame?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Janney's had an extremely busy fall,
So obviously not gonna start too much up there before the springtime, so if this is something that you've got to put off till the snow's off the ground and that kind of thing, I don't think we have a problem with that, as long as we can get our feet running in the spring early.
Keith?
Just through recent conversations with Mr. Janney, he no longer takes on anything over 30 acres. Just so you're aware.
He what?
No longer takes on any surveys over 30 acres.
Well, this is only 2.5 acres, will he do it?
He may, but he's paying on having to replot the original 100 acres. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're just gonna chunk out a piece of land.
Right, just saying,
Maybe
that's the original point.
Yeah.
Give him a call, see what he'll do. We don't have that much snow on the ground right now. This shouldn't be a big deal.
We appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
Did we budget for that?
Budget for?
Well, when it was approved, did we budget as the town for the cost of the survey?
No,
No,
We didn't.
that's why I just asked how we're gonna pay for it.
you're gonna have to take it out of some account and overdraft it, and depends on the annual article that allows you to pay overdrafts.
Yeah.
That's how you gotta do it now.
Well, maybe.
You spend over, when June comes, you got an article in there that says,
Yeah, but
allow you to spend cover your overdrafts.
I would recommend, Mr. Chair, if the board decides to have it surveyed at the town's expense, that you take it from the general reserve. And if you want to do that this evening, you could, provide me with a not to exceed number. I really don't know what Mr. Janney will charge. I haven't seen the terrain. I don't know what information is available to him. So I can do a little more research and come back.
Yeah, give them a call and ask them what it's gonna cost us.
Really expensive, I'm just saying.
What's that?
Sometimes surveys are very expensive, that's why I'm just saying.
Yes, Jay.
Where is it? Right beside the snowmobile barn right there somewhere?
No, it's up on this, the closest to the town.
Oh, that end of the
That
transfer
property
station.
line up there is pretty close to where the, you know where Skyline Road is?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the property of,
Wait, what?
having that property,
Right.
going back 330 feet and then down Moon Lake Road.
So it's right on the main road.
Yes.
You butts it on probably Wayne Woods land.
Is what?
It abuts probably Wayne Woods land.
I would assume so, yeah.
Those stakes probably all
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine the survey costing much to me.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the town's line goes back there quite a ways.
Oh,
That's
oh, ways.
127 acres.
Yeah. Pretty simple, I think, but.
You might want to reach out to Jay, like you suggested, you don't ask for a quote, and at your next meeting, approve money from the
Just
general
said
fund to pay for
Yep.
everything. And
Yep.
if Janie can't do it, you know, I
Thank
can
you.
go to survey.
Thank you. Believe it or not, I had that part under control. Okay, thank you. All set, Joe, with that? Yep, very good. CMP street lighting, the number 9. I'm glad Dennis is here.
Before you
Right.
start on that street lighting thing, I just want to say that I did turn in 13 street lights last night.
They're out.
That are out.
Oh, yeah.
Except for there's nothing we can do with the one outside this because the Christmas lighting they have on the building is way too bright for the electric eye that's on the light and the light will not come on.
Yeah.
No, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, the 6 of them that I counted the other day,
One of
Dennis.
Roger Page's is out, which is right down the street.
Right. Right. Okay, Joe?
So, Mr. Chair, strangely enough, that conversation is what prompted this investigation a number of years ago, and it's been rekindled. I talked to Tasha some number of years ago, Keith and I talked to her about streetlights and what can we do to update them. So there's a proposal here from CMP, essentially that offers to the town an opportunity for them to come in and replace all of your streetlights, take out the sodium, whatever they're called, the old style streetlights that are there that burn out frequently, with LED fixtures at no upfront cost to the town. Doesn't cost the town anything. There's a little waiting period, but there's an agreement in here that they've sent you. And essentially, if you sign up to do that, if we sign up to do that, there's a cost savings, projected cost savings of $7,000 annually. And there's a 15-year agreement. So there were 3 things that I kind of thought about throughout this process of talking with Keith. The first one, hang on a second. The first one was dark skies. So that was something that actually came out of the economic development meeting. And I talked to Keith about that. And I talked with Bailey also. So dark skies compliance is a program that kind of wants to make sure that the night skies aren't polluted with light. So these are compliant with that. The other one was reliability. So these don't burn out quite as much. And then the third thing was downtown. We know in the downtown plan that there's some talk about wanting to have potentially streetscape lighting that doesn't look like the tall overhead standard street lights that are there. And that was something I kind of brought up to CMP, and what they said was they'd be willing to be flexible with us on the terms downtown, so downtown Boston, downtown Mason. If in 10 years, say we come up with the funds and the means to put in more of an artisan type street light. So they're somewhat flexible on the terms. Those are 3 things that we kind of talked about. So it's there, it's presented to you as an opportunity, as a proposal. There's no upfront cost. CMP owns all the equipment, they maintain all the equipment. They'll fix it, they'll keep it going. And one other thing that we reached out to Nick Tracy did it for us, reached out to Nick Sampson. Remember, not long ago, you signed an amendment to keep us at 15% or below 15% of the solar credits, so that we didn't go over on those. This would bring us down to 9% instead of 15. That email's in there. If it turns out that that percentage or that ratio doesn't work, we could always get another amendment from revision. So it's a chance to save $7,000 a year, get lights that are dark sky compliant. Should be less likely to burn out. It will be less likely to burn out and cause problems with not being out. Another thing I did was I asked the police chief to go out. He sent one of his officers out to make sure that the areas that needed brighter lights would have brighter lights. So there's a couple of classifications in there. He said everything looks good the way it's presented. So that's the proposal.
Did the police officer also count the ones that are out? It's a serious question. I mean, because the two of us have ridden around town and there's quite a few of them that we're paying for that don't work.
Well, Mountain Road everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of them are residential areas. I'm sure some of those neighbors have been used to it, now aren't having it. And there are some of us who are in business that keep barking about getting it back and don't get it back, so.
And there's some that work too well, they're on all that.
That's right.
We call them day burners. One right in front of the old restaurant. But you also have the option, I know you looked into probably, is to take over your own lights. A lot of towns are doing that. The only thing you have to have is a bunch of trucks, somebody knows how to fix streetlights.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I've looked into, not here in the last 3 months, but previously in my career I have. And this is the way I would recommend going. Absolutely, CMP is a good company, and they take care of it, and they own it. If we own it, and this, you know, we could go into the discussion from Consolidated earlier, but, you know, if we own the streetlights, then we're responsible, like Dennis said. We've got to figure out how we're going to take care of them, whether we hire someone to do it.
What I would do first is I would do a sample. Have them put up 2 or 3 of these lights. See how the people like them, see how you like them, see what they look like. Instead of going to a whole change and all of a sudden somebody said, that sucks. So I would have them put up 2 or 3 and try them, see what you think of them. Okay?
You got a question?
Yeah, I read the newspapers, some towns are going with a different outfit, but I didn't write it down. Just went with a new
There's
one.
private companies out there.
That's doing that, just started doing it, but I don't know what the price is there, but I just noticed they just started doing it, but I don't know the details of it.
Typically what happens, Mr. Chair, is towns will go out to RFP and they'll buy all new fixtures, they'll buy them themselves. They'll buy all the lights and they own them, and then they have somebody put them up, and then they have a 20 or 30-year agreement with somebody that maintains them. So there is an upfront cost. The big difference with that is the upfront cost is borne by the town. You gotta pay it upfront. And of course, you spread that out over a number of years, but there's a cost. In this case, in this 15-year proposal, there's no upfront cost and there's a savings, $7,000 a year. Dennis has a good point. You know, I've seen what they look like. I drive through a couple of towns that have them in it. You know, it's a cleaner light. It is a little bit different, but it's dark sky compliant, so it kind of fits in with, you know, the character, what we're looking for.
What about 2 months later, even if you don't like them, they become common and it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And no one's gonna go back to gas-filled lights anymore anyway, so.
Yeah, at some point, they're just gonna be obsolete and irreplaceable.
Mark?
I was just gonna mention this woman from CMP suggests checking with the town of Greenville. They just completed the install up there, and that's a lakeside community, tourist oriented. And, you know, we could get some valuable feedback from them.
There you go, road trip, that's the time.
Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, but the LED lights are adjustable, correct?
I don't know what types they're using, but they could be. I mean, they do make them for
Thank you. Joe?
So, Mr. Chair, I failed to mention this earlier. I got overloaded, but I did talk to Mike Roy from Greenville. They just wrapped this up about a month ago, a few weeks ago. That's where I first learned that they were dark skies compliant, but then of course I followed up with Dave Miller from the Heritage Trust and Nancy Croson, and they actually took the spec sheet, the cut sheet from CMP, sent it over. They are compliant. Mike Roy said that the process took a week. They came in, essentially just changing out the head of the thing. It takes 10 minutes or less for each one.
Just changing out the head, the arms and things.
Yeah, so in a week, it was done, and they were happy with it. So Greenville had a good experience.
Dennis might know this one. Can you like have them say you just want these lights in the summertime? You don't need them in the winter. Some in certain places. Is that possible? I wonder.
Not really, because you're under 15-year contract and that covers.
Right, and if you're writing up a new
Yeah,
contract,
they don't separate.
there's no way of turning it on and off, probably, the light.
No, you're just paying so much for the,
Right.
the light.
I was thinking summertime, like people hiking,
Yeah.
have these lights. In the summertime, these roads, people want to hike, somewhere, then, but you don't, nobody can hike the one, you just go away though, I don't, probably not like that's possible, I don't.
There are some places where you really should have light. You know, usually at road intersections.
Right.
There's none at Bonnie Point, there's none at Quimby Pond. You know, those, it's nice to emergency vehicles at night, you know, to be able to have intersections lit up.
I'd like to see another one at the bottom of Allen Street. Pretty dark all the way.
Yeah,
up
Allen
across
Street,
Street.
there's a section right in there by, just below Rudy Davis, this is kind of dark. They can use it like, yeah. And you might be able to, under the contract, if you don't mess with the number of lights, take some of those lights. There are other places. There's one that's down on the end of North Camp Road. I mean, it's good for the summertime, but it's gonna be done in winter.
I was thinking like on the Ball Mountain Road, in places, I don't know if people hike a lot up to Quasit and
Rumford Road.
lit up, the Rumford
Road's
Road.
got a few way down.
You know, if I go on to hiking or Quasit, I don't
The
know.
first part of Ball Mountain Road is dark in a pocket right now, those poles don't work.
But you mean, I,
Most of them are on Ball
No, they're not.
Mountain. They were last night.
Well, they weren't tonight.
Really?
Yeah,
I've called those with it numerous times, they're intermittent.
it goes on when it feels like it.
Yeah.
Yep. Can I make a recommendation, Dennis, or a request from you? Could you just give Joe some of your valuable experience on how to go about some of this? And, you know, in terms of, you know, you've been with CMP forever and a day.
I know Tasha pretty well.
Yep. Would that be all right? Have him give you some feedback on some of all this stuff, Joe?
Fine with me.
Good.
Yeah. One thing I would add, Mr. Chair, that there's a waiting list for these projects. So once you get in, there's a waiting period before they start construction. It's.
You want to act on it tonight, or do you want to get 3 up and take a look at it?
I say we just go for it.
Yeah, we're gonna save $7,000 and they've got to work, right? Go
Yeah.
for it? Yeah.
And they'll last longer.
so.
Make a motion.
So, Joe, do you need us to approve you signing the CMP LED streetlight conversion?
Yes.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve, to allow the town manager to sign the Central Maine Power CMP LED streetlight conversion agreement.
Second. Any further discussion from the board? All in favor? Okay. Grant writing, grant acceptance policy, first reading. Damn. Get forward. By the way, I like your recycling paper, Tracy, but didn't that screw me up? What are we talking about here? All right.
Does it need to be read aloud in its entirety? Or is it just the fact that the board is reading it for the first time in our packets?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of.
We've read them in the past, but I'm fine with that, believe me.
Well, I mean, like.
We have a significant change. Let me read that. The policy change that's now being changed in this policy that currently exists, it says any application requiring a significant local match must be approved by the selectmen prior to submitting the application to the grant authority. That's the addition to the current policy.
I like it.
End of first reading. Next one. New paid leave law. The change, well, I don't even know if that's really even changed. I mean, if
everything else is done, you've added an email address.
It's an
Just give me
addition, it's an addition, just to.
Yeah, okay, in addition to where you can find it.
So the personal time off is this, it's inserted in the Article 9 vacation section of the personnel policy. This is new language here that's underlined. Personal time off.
I feel better because I don't have that in mind.
Yeah, I think you just saw it. Bottom of that page,
Oh, the
underline.
bold one down here?
Yeah.
Right.
Got it, let me read it to you. Personal time off effective January 1st, 2021. Employees may use up to 40 hours of their vacation as noted above as personal time off, PTO, as required by 26 MRSA 637. This leave may be used in increments of no less than 1 hour. An employee must be employed at least 120 hours before becoming eligible for the personal time off. Part-time employees who are not otherwise eligible for paid leave pursuant to these policies shall be eligible for personal time off. All employees will earn 1 hour of personal time off for every 40 hours worked. I'm coming to work to do that. An employee taking personal time off shall be paid the same base rate as all other employees. An employee taking personal time off absent an emergency, illness, or sudden necessity for taking earned leave shall give reasonable notice to his or her supervisor of the employee's intent to use PTO. The use of personal time off must be scheduled to prevent undue hardship on the employee as reasonably determined by the town. Up to 40 hours of unused personal time off may be carried forward into the next calendar year, but in no event may an employee have more than 40 hours available per calendar year. Upon separation from employment, any accrued personal time hours up to 40 hours shall be paid to the employee. End of first reading. I feel like I'm short.
Oh, no, I've got so much on this stuff.
Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, it's not required that if an employee leaves, that we reimburse them for their PTO. And it also says in here as well, but if they rehired again within 12 months, they would get that PTO. Did Annalee help with the description on it? So the other thing is something for us to also think about is just doing the 40 hours each year. So if you have that, then you don't have to, because it's minimum of 40. If you have that, from what I understand from all the question and answers that are on there, you may not have to keep track of every hour that's made over the 40-hour mark. Because vacation time doesn't work. A lot of times, like when it's your busiest time for like the budget season, unless it's an actual emergency, I just think that we need more detail with this. And the more we have a policy explaining it with the different options and making it very clear, there's no room for interpretation. Is what I suggest.
You have your hand up, Cindy?
I've got, I didn't know if Shelley was done.
I'm trying to think, there's some other things too about time keeping system. I know that we just do the paycheck. It all depends on which way you go. If you're gonna do a minimum of 40 hours every calendar year, then you don't necessarily have to keep track of every hour that they work over the 40 hours. Then you have to make sure vacation time doesn't go into that because it's not time to actually work. And how to calculate it, so you could, you could basically go like each quarter of how much you've earned. There's a lot, I'm sorry, there's just a lot that's in the question and answers part that I just think we need more detail on the policy and a more explanation about how it's used. And then also it's my understanding that according to this, until we redo the contracts for our collective bargaining agreements, they stay in place until there's a new contract. So it's not added to that. Let's see, employee covered by collective bargaining agreements as of 1/1/2021 are excluded until the collective bargaining agreement expires. New collective bargaining agreements after that date must include this benefit at a minimum.
Anything else? Cindy?
All right, yeah, just a couple of things. So I thought that's the first sentence on page 2, an employee taking PTO shall be paid the same base rate as all other employees. I don't understand that. So we've got salaried employees and we've got hourly employees, and so I don't know what that means. So that would be something I'd like to see clarified.
Do you have an answer right now?
Yeah, it means, I believe it means that the base rate is the same for all employees. That's the way I'm reading it. So base rate is your normal standard hourly rate. It's not time and a half, it's
Right,
base rate.
it's, yeah.
That being the case, then what's the standard rate?
So
Straight time.
it's, yeah, so it's paid as straight time. They can't take PTO and be paid overtime.
Right.
So, yeah, so whether you make 20 or 15, the base rate, depending on what your position.
And basically, we're not creating any additional hours that are added to the tally. It's just recategorizing that they're accruing this more flexible way to use time off under the PTO standards. So do we have, all right, so going into paragraph 2 on that page.
Can I just make sure we're in all, I want to make sure I'm clear on this one now. An employee taking PTO shall be paid the same individual base rate or that applies to them, so it's clear?
Maybe we should just reword.
Sounds like they all get the same pay. I don't know whose rate they use.
No, it's the rate that they get for pay. It's.
If you got an hourly employee that's getting $22 an hour, that's what his rate of pay is. If you've got somebody here that's $15.50 an hour, that's their rate of pay in the PTO.
But then we've got,
The wording kind of funny.
It is, but that's why I'm asking for a clarification.
yeah, I think, yeah, and so what do you do with a salaried employee? How,
Could break the salary down to what they're getting paid 40 hours a week.
but I guess that's just worked in. It just doesn't count. I mean, you're not gonna assign a value to it. Here's an hour that or 2 hours you needed to take of PTO, but you couldn't put in for vacation time in advance for it. Or it's like a little different category, right?
And it's a separate 5 days.
It's a separate what?
It's a separate 5 days in addition to whatever the benefits are.
No, it's not additional days.
It's not, because it says somewhere in here, it says something about vacation was totally separate, and so sick time was also totally separate. So I read it as it's 5 extra days.
No.
Right. This is all extra, this 40 hours.
No, it
a
isn't.
year.
No, it's a different classification of hours earned. So say someone has 2 weeks of vacation time they've earned in a year, up to 40 hours or 1 week of that accrued time is classified as PTO. So.
The first paragraph says what Cindy's saying right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, so.
Says under vacation time, line number 1.
So say for instance, we've got a policy, our policy for vacation time says you need to use your vacation time in 8-hour increments. Well, they've got 40 hours or can accrue up to 40 hours of PTO that they can use in hourly increments.
Right.
This is just allowing them an opportunity to pull vacation time for personal use.
It reclassifies, yeah, I guess.
If they have it in the bank, so to speak. Mr.
Correct.
Chair. This
Right.
gives, so it does that for people that are full-time and have benefits. This also gives benefits to part-time employees. So if you work part-time, when you work 40 hours, you get an hour.
An hour.
So if it takes you 3 months to work 40 hours, if you work for transfer stations or at the lifeguard at the beach or something, you still get that under state law. So this policy really is our best first attempt at boiling that state law into policy. So they get that if they're part-time. But you're right about the full-time folks, the 40 hours of benefit hours that they already have, the vacation hours, they already have in books, 40 hours of that can be used as.
Yeah, and so they just need to keep track of what has been used for PTO.
Yep.
Now,
But Shelley, excuse me, Cindy, and your concern about the salaried ones, they have a different, if memory serves me, and I don't have it memorized, but they have a different classification for personal time within the salary structure. Is that correct?
It's the same policy
Same.
for hourly or salary.
Oh, that definitely needs to be looked at and how to apply it.
so also, I guess I'd like to see reasonable notice a little more defined on it. So second, and maybe, I don't want a department left shorthanded or whatnot. I mean, it's not gonna matter in certain cases, but I don't know, is there, I'm just putting it out there. I think reasonable notice,
Well, I understand that, but I guess it's how you interpret personal time. So, I mean, I guess I'm not sure how we use sick time with the town, but all of a sudden you gotta go pick your kid up, use our personal time. You can't give reasonable notice because you gotta go pick her up, or you just use that as sick time. I gotta go, or Joe, I gotta go. So I don't know where that falls.
So if it's an emergency, Mr. Chairman, it's treated much like sick time in this second paragraph from the top, or the second one down. Absent, an employee taking PTO absent in emergency, illness, or sudden necessity for taking earned leave shall give reasonable notice.
Yeah, so right there.
Use of PTO must be scheduled to prevent undue hardship.
so I guess my point is reasonable notice can vary amongst supervisors. Unless reasonable notice is just to you, the town manager, and you have a consistent thought and can treat employees all fairly based on your interpretation of reasonable notice. Otherwise, we have 3 or 4 interpretations of reasonable notice.
Should we define reasonable notice for the second reading?
I'm just suggesting it.
I think that we ought to give our department heads a little credit and let them be able to have a little discretion when it comes to that stuff without having to always go to Joe about it. I think everybody's pretty competent.
Shelley?
I just think that, like, so one of the examples that they had is like someone was, went to hit their punch in and they had like certain increments. So basically they were 15 minutes late because they had a doctor's appointment or they were half an hour. So they suggested putting increments of the PTO time either by 15, like, so by quarter, half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. That would be required to be taken. Was one of the suggestions. And I think that alongside is basically that if someone is out sick and they're using personal time off, they don't have to get the letter if they would have if they were to use sick time, right? Because the 3 days, they wouldn't have to have a doctor's note explaining the 3 days. But usually personal, unless it's an emergency, they suggest giving it so much time, but it's basically having an entire policy of it all laid out. But I'm just trying to find that other part that said something about the vacation.
Okay, while you're looking, anything from you, Joe?
No, I'm just trying to figure it out.
You had your hand up, Dennis?
Just a couple points to make, because I dealt with this for 15 years. Employees and sick days and stuff like that. One concern is that, does it say that you have to work 40 hours to get the hour?
I thought it did.
Says that.
Yeah.
Okay, you may have a
It
problem.
says every hour's work, every 40 hours work.
Okay, you may have a problem with weeks that have holidays in them.
All right, let's just be clear about this. First of all, you have to have worked 120 hours before you qualify
Right.
to get to this point. And then, go ahead, somebody.
Which everyone has. We don't have any new employees that haven't worked.
Right.
120.
Right.
Did you want me to not clarify that? Go ahead.
I think what Dennis is saying, so if you got a holiday during the week and it's, holiday hours may not be considered worked hours, is what Dennis is getting at. So every 40 hours work, so if this week you only work 32 because Christmas was in there, do the holiday hours count as hours worked? Is that what you're saying?
As long as the thing in the policy doesn't say hours worked, because you're not working on a holiday.
Yeah.
You can't put that towards hours worked.
Yeah, you should, yeah. Yep.
The MMA example indicates 1 hour for every 40 hours worked.
Which it says here on the last line of that page, on the bottom. Last line, all employees will earn 1 hour of personal time for every 40 hours worked. That's where I was going.
So all
So
your
that part's
vacation,
in there.
so all your vacation time, you're gonna pay on that then.
Right.
Well, they do the same thing at the school. I mean, unless you can get, if your vacation comes in there, you lose out the way it's set up, your number of hours.
Right.
And a lot of places like that. The other thing, somebody approves this, or can you just take your time off, your personal time?
No, it has to be approved by supervisor. Well, currently it's supervisor, correct?
So for vacation, yes, if it's sick time, if you're talking current policy, what's in effect now, vacation time needs to be approved by supervisor. Sick time, there's a policy for sick time.
Right, but this all revolves around coming up in the vacation category.
That's where it gets a little confusing. If you're a full-time employee that has benefits in the bank, the first 40 hours come out of your vacation, it can be used as personal time off in the increments of 1 hour. Just to get back to what Dennis had said a minute ago, Mr. Chair, if I could. If you work a week that only has 32 hours in it, those still, you don't lose that week. The 8 hours for the 40 comes from the following Monday. So that's when, so there's some bookkeeping involved in this too. You know, it's going to, Rebecca's probably cringing, you know, because her office is going to have to manage this and take care of it. It's going to be an added layer of tracking it. You know, once it's built, it probably won't be that bad.
Right,
It's
it's
built
just
into the
being-
system.
Right, because the system will keep track of the actual hours worked.
Right.
Which can then be translated into hours earned.
I would recommend inserting in regards to this particular policy, holiday hours are considered, and vacation hours are considered hours worked.
Are not considered.
No, I
hours
say
worked.
they should be considered.
I say they shouldn't.
I heard that.
The other thing you have is how you're gonna handle,
Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
well, that was a quiet time.
We gotta think once in a while up here. I like to let them do that.
Doctor's appointment, dentist appointments, are those considered? Can you take off sick time for those?
Yes.
Or,
We're getting off topic.
no, but I mean,
Hot time off, I don't know.
no, what I'm saying is if you have put in a personal policy, then you can tell your employees, you're not gonna use up your sick time to go to take your child to an appointment. You're gonna use your personal hours. You can do that. I mean, these are negotiated things.
Okay.
A lot of contracts have that.
So in terms of this first reading and what we've got here, I appreciate your input, Dennis, but we've got to respond to what we have here on paper. Okay, the input's important, but with what we have here now, do you have enough information based upon the discussion from the board and others to make us feel ready? Do you have some more? Go ahead, Shelley.
Oh, well, I'm just wondering, like, it says, one of the employee questions, does the employer always have to give me time off? The answer is no, but we don't have that written in there. The employer can require up to 4 weeks' notice to use of leave other than an emergency, illness, or sudden necessity, and can restrict dates that such time off may be granted.
So where are you reading from, Shelley?
I'm on number 48 on, I'm reading the.
She got information. from
Yeah, that's
the
what I
state
thought.
law.
It's Municipal Department of Labor frequently asked question and answers on earned paid leave. And I went right to the website and I just got all the question and answers. Because all that did was make, oh, well, we're missing certain stuff, elements in there. If you want to specify it, so it's a less of a.
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt all this because this is a perfect time for this concern I have. That's super good information. So we all have computers now. Could you just share the link with us so we can go grab it and be prepared for tonight? In the future, I'm not picking on you. I just think this is a good point. You find something, you find something.
It was on in here.
Oh, it's that's what this.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
link. I had to go around, but it didn't quite do the line after it, but it's
Exactly.
the exact same
Right.
link.
Okay.
Exactly. But thank you. Anything else, Shelley?
No, I think that's, I'm just looking for that.
Okay. Cindy?
No, I just think it needs more work.
Yep. Ethan, any more?
No, I think I'm good.
Joe?
I agree with him. I think it needs more work. I don't really understand it that well yet.
No, it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's gonna take some time.
Yeah.
It looks like if you got vacation pay, I don't see what the difference is really. If you get time off, if you didn't have vacation pay, I don't know what the difference is.
It's accruing a different utilization of your vacation time. That's the best way I can
Right, yeah.
put that into a different, small summary.
Right, you know.
Is that a fair assessment, Joe?
It is. And it also protects or gives a benefit to folks who are part-time. We don't have a lot of part-time employees in Rangeley, but this does provide them with 1 hour of PTO for every 4 hours. So that previously, that is not the law today. It will be January 1st.
January 1.
Right. Anything else in that category? Okay. Town manager report, you have your department head updates. Any questions or comments about the department head updates? Some of them have been pretty busy. Yes, Joe?
I have one update that will take place in person, Mr. Chair. Public Services Director Savage is here and will give the board a very brief update on projects that are in progress and pending.
Awesome, go right ahead.
All right, so yeah, Joe and I had talked, this is just obviously perfect time as we are in transitional period for seasons and approaching budget season, but wanted to again give you a quick synopsis of where we are. Projects that are 100% finished this year. We completed Cottage Ave and Lake and Fuller Street are now 100% complete off our road project list.
Excellent.
Or completed. Two streets or two projects that are substantially complete that are waiting punch list items would be Allen Street, Ball Mountain Road. Those again are essentially completed, just need probably to be looked at loaning procedure again, seeding, et cetera, make sure that all the projects defects are taken care of. Projects that are in motion, that's probably 50% or so more. We have the town office walkway, obviously, which forever is going to haunt me, but we're progressing slowly. Cemetery clearing, we obviously halted for the season based on conditions. So it's been cleared of 4 acres. We need to finish stumping and then pushing material around and reevaluate drainage, et cetera, and seed and look at replanting a buffer of trees between certain elements of that lot. Park Street, that is aside from the surface pavement, we were waiting just to make sure that the ground conditions with frost movement have come to recognize any kind of defects that may occur there. We feel pretty comfortable with that. We can probably get surface on that next spring. And then off of a road project, the fiber optic transition into the building is 100% complete. Went pretty much smooth through last Wednesday. And we are now at 100 megabytes in this facility, phones, internet, and I tell you, I've been pretty pleased with the transition. It was painless, it was quick. So I'm going to consider that project at a 50% project. We have one last phase I'd like to do. We'll budget through that with this next budget, if you will go for it, would be just to reclassify or rewire all the junction boxes in the rooms, have them all labeled, and run Cat 6 cable, which will accommodate now the speeds we have in the building. Cat 5, we currently have is a 10 megabytes per second max speed. Cat 6 is up to 100. which would be forever be our needs, but it allows us to organize the downstairs closet and be able to troubleshoot smoothly on the phone, or myself go downstairs and say, why isn't this RJ45 jack working? And I can go room to room and go from there. And then last one was project slated to start in the spring. Just a reminder, Little Lake Road is slated to start this spring, 21, and then the Oval Sidewalk project will be slated also.
Any questions for Keith? Thank you, Keith. Anything else? No? All set?
No, Mr. Chair, all set. Thank you.
Okay. You have an updated timeline for the budget, starting January 5th on down to June 8th. Questions? Changes? Requests for a change? Okay, thank you. Tomorrow night, we have at 5 p.m. for the public hearing, TIF. It will be attended by anybody on Zoom, and those of us here can make it tomorrow. December 21st at 5 p.m., AvCog, form-based code. January 4th, executive session for employee eval. Yes.
So on that employee eval, could we ask the fire chief to complete the evaluation himself and get it to us prior to that?
Yeah.
Self-eval? Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
it's basically
Absolutely.
what a lot of people do, so we don't see everything every day. But-
No.
And if Joe has comments or something like that to add as well, I would like his input because he's the one that the public probably goes to if there's anything.
Did you speak with him? Make sure you
Oh,
have that.
absolutely, yeah, I'll speak with the chief. Yeah.
Okay.
Be happy to.
Any other comments on that? Anything under other business? Moving right along here. Okay. Select board communications. You have anything, Joe? This is where you get to tell us if there's it, okay? Shelley?
Okay. Also in the newsletter that we received,
This one?
Yep, I noticed that Greenville, one of the things that Greenville has done based on the Moosehead Lake Economic Development Corp., they acquired a 5.5 parcel of land and estimate that they can put 20 homes on that for Greenville residents, and they're working with like Maine State Housing. I don't know if that's something that, I'm just throwing it out there as an idea. I mean, I'm not sure what the cost was for that, but they're just trying to, because they're in the same situation as we are, where the housing market is crazy and it's making it less capable for others that actually work in the towns to be able to afford those homes.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, also I see that Stephen Philbrick has made a spotlight in the Daily News in regards to Millinocket.
What a smart ass.
Wrong town, but that's okay.
Wrong Stephen Philbrick too. Anything?
That's how rumors get started.
Cindy?
All set, Steve.
Okay, two things. I don't know if any of you knew John Jenkins. This is a gentleman I knew for a long period of time in my life. Passed away. He owns a lot of titles in the martial art world, but more importantly, this is a guy that mayor of two big communities in our state, made quite an impact in the political world. And I just want to share one thing that John and I talked about earlier this year before he passed away. If you don't know John Jenkins, for those of you out there in Zoom land, he's a black gentleman down in the Woosonobin area. And he and I were talking during the beginning of the Black Lives Matter. And I'm not getting political, but I will tell you his response was, all lives matter. Fabulous quote. We're a great guy, a really great guy. All right, Cindy and I had an opportunity this week to have a conversation with Chief Bacon about a number of things, but one of them was the COVID situation and policies that possibly could be instituted, and what I think I can paraphrase correctly, whatever that word is, correctly. And Cindy, chime in, please, at the end of this, that we're in good hands with Lindsay and Joe and the fire chief. And I think we came out of that meeting feeling like we're going in a very good direction. And new policies aren't necessarily needed. But I will request for those who are, I understand, Mark, you're with the press now? I see you have press pass on. I don't know how to get this out, but I think it's super imperative that the town of Rangeley, I think it's important that the town of Rangeley recognize that if COVID strikes a business, it's not intentional. It's not intentional. It's something that, because we are a travel and tourism town, and because we have lives to lead, and because we have businesses to run, it's devastating. I can speak from personal experience. It's devastating. You're looked at like you're a leper. Your employees are treated differently. So when this town is in crisis, there is no better community on the face of the earth than Rangeley, Maine. They come out. We are in crisis, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to get that message out there to everybody that we talk to. Because, you know, when somebody calls their boss and said, I have tested positive, that means that business typically will have to shut down.
Right.
And it impacts, in my particular instance, 32 people on the front line of my business and all their families. So be kind, be patient, be supportive. And if you have questions, it's not the hotline. Get a hold of the town office and speak with Lindsay, speak with Joe, call the fire chief, speak with one of us. And we'll get you the information, the help that we can get you. We will work together in this, and that's the only way we're going to get through this thing. Enough said. Okay. Anything else? Don't cry.
One more thing. So the Maine Tourism Association is offering grants. Joe has posted it on our Facebook page for everyone to apply with the link.
Thank you. If nothing else, I need a motion or to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056E, consultations with legal counsel.
I need a second.
Oh, second.
All in favor? Thank you. So moved. We're coming back into public. We gotta wait.
Yeah, you're recording now.
Okay. I need to move here. Hand this over to Cindy.
You called us out.
What's that?
You've got to call
I
us
already
out.
called us out.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to. I don't have, here we go. Pause.
What was that piece of paper? It's right
It's 6A, that's the correction, it's actually personnel matters,
Okay,
not contract issues.
but I don't have everything else leading up to it.
there. MRSA.
MRS 4056A, letter.
I got it, Cindy, right here.
MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, 405, labor negotiations, MRSA 4056B.
No, it's 6A.
6D.
So
On our sheet, it says 6D.
Yeah, D is wrong.
We changed that, that's what that note is.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Yeah.
So,
Take it
it's-
D and I'll second it.
so,
I mean, A.
so continue.
Second. All those in favor? We're in.
Or hot mess.
Thank you.